And we are back for another exciting week of GPS Live. Hello, everybody listening in online, tuning in on platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. As you can see, this is a very special edition of GPS Live this week. I have some wonderful guests with me. So as usual, I am Jonathan Singer, and to my virtual right, we have
Steve Rosenkrantz. I'm the Director for Corporate Information Security at GuidePoint Security.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. And below us, welcome, Amber.
Yeah. Hi, Amber DeVilbiss. I am a security advisor here at GuidePoint.
Awesome. Well, in this special edition of GPS Live, we are focusing on Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Many of our viewers online may be, in tune with what's going on, but for everybody else, we want to, talk about what's important to us in the cybersecurity industry and how to make this world a little bit more secure. And so to kick things off, thank you both for joining this week. I know, Steve, it was a little bit of a last minute. Tristan is out sick, but we do thank you for taking the time to hop on and have some fun with us. And Amber, absolutely. And you have some really great passions about cybersecurity community and education and the next generation. We're really excited to deep dive into some of that. And so this is the GPS Live for the week of October 14th, 2022. Oh, Steve, it looks like you're I'm going to mute you for a second. But when we get you back in here, it'll be all great. And this is why we do it live. So, like all good things, of course, we do have to mention that the views and opinions expressed by the hosts of this live stream are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official opinions of GuidePoint Security. All right, now with that, since it looks like Steve is a bit out of the picture for a minute, thanks to lovely technicals. Amber, we pulled up an article a bit earlier on what's going on in the industry. And so it's focused on the cruelty and the temptations around job offer scams that are running rampant right now, especially in cybersecurity. I know I have just been inundated on LinkedIn messages for all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. Luckily, they haven't necessarily been malicious in intent. But are you seeing any kind of stuff like this out there, especially now that there's this high demand for new hires in cybersecurity?
Yeah, absolutely. And I myself, just like you, and I'm sure many others that are watching or out there have, experienced the flood of the slew of messages in our inboxes every day. But actually, about 5, maybe 6 years ago was the first time I've heard of this happening. And it kind of, just got really kind of clammed up and nervous. So if there's anyone on here that's watching that I haven't responded to through LinkedIn Messenger, that's probably why. And I apologize. I just have to stay safer on that side. So but it is sad and unfortunate, that these kinds of things continue to happen, especially because people who are eagerly seeking jobs and trying to get hired, or even, people new to the industry, it kind of, it's very disheartening and it definitely shies people away. So.
Absolutely. One of the things they call it in the article is, right, the concept of we all want a job. We want to make a living, right? And so part of that is we do have to put ourselves out there, and we almost have to, be vulnerable to allow people to contact us and provide interest. In fact, Steve, you were mentioning, by the way, welcome back, before the show, of just being inundated to the point that LinkedIn is no longer of interest, right?
Yeah, I'm not a social media person in the first place. And, I try to be polite in all of my correspondence. And when I was an early adopter of LinkedIn, so I was pretty good about responding to everyone who reached out to me. And as the years went by, it got to the point where it's almost like I was getting spammed on an ongoing basis. And it became pretty frustrating. And then finally at a point where it was filling up not only my LinkedIn messages, but also my Gmail, which it's tied to, I went ahead and I disabled my account entirely for 2 years. And that cut back, way back on all the unsolicited correspondence I got. But I understand that it serves a purpose. And when I was younger in my career, I could see where this would be very inviting. And if the economy softens up, it will be particularly inviting to respond to those kinds of communications. So you definitely have to be careful because, some of the mental deficients out there that want to take advantage of people in their time of need, they're going to escalate their efforts. And so we have to be vigilant. And so, I know we'll get to it later when we talk about Amber's book, but the need to cultivate that broader awareness and that mindset very early in working forward, absolutely essential, and to not be credulous, to be skeptical of these things. But yeah, definitely got very frustrated, and I was an early adopter, and then I just cut it off. I'll be back soon because I think that's polite, but I'm not a big fan.
I'll be sure to send you a DM immediately once you come back online. And Amber, you were even telling me about the funny meme about it, right? If you don't have a computer, you can't get hacked. It kind of aligns with this.
Yeah.
But no. So the article does kind of dive into some of the tactics that people are using. Most of it around social engineering and trying to make it sound like these opportunities exist and to coax you into a number of things, right? What were we seeing? We're seeing download files that could potentially compromise your system. We're seeing requests for financial transactions as part of an authorization or an onboarding process. It's definitely something that it sounds to me like aligns exactly with what a lot of your awareness messaging is, Amber. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's kind of, and I've noticed, and I'm sure some of us have, right? Sometimes you'll call in or in the mail, you'll get a bill from your energy provider, and it'll say, hey, by the way, we will never, 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 never call and ask for this information. We will, never email you about this. And so that's great. I think that kind of in itself helps spread that awareness, especially for folks who are tech averse anyways. And they're like, I don't even want to deal with any of this. And so they get a letter and they're like, oh, well, I should call and pay this. And I'm like, no. We need to verify all this first. Right. So yeah, I definitely focus on awareness more than anything else. So.
And so to kind of pivot around what we're talking about here, one of the key details it sounds like we can all agree on, and hopefully including our viewers too, we do love your comments, we do love your interactions, is that if it's too good to be true, then it probably is. Or it's simply because it is too good to be true. And so having a little bit of skepticism, right? You were talking about before the show that skepticism was healthy, right? It's part of what kind of keeps you going. And Steve, you teach us skepticism and some of the awareness here within GuidePoint, helping make sure that we, even as cyber practitioners, have to stay secure too, right?
That's absolutely necessary. And one of the things with GuidePoint, which is an ever-growing company, we have two halves of the whole, really. There's the more technical side where we have pro services and salespeople that are immersed in this line of work, and they're interacting with customers routinely. And so this is top of mind for them all the time. But then we have this growing back of house function. They're not necessarily security practitioners. However, we are all targets. And as GuidePoint increases its size and its footprint for customers and different technologies it sells and the services it provides, we're increasingly being attacked. And so it's necessary through our ongoing training and awareness efforts, keep it top of mind. Even the most seasoned person, if they're in a hurry and it's a well-crafted message and it manages to beguile all the controls we have and it gets to your inbox, if you're in a hurry, you might click a link. And so we all get that sinking feeling in the pit of our stomach where we're like, especially if you're the director of corporate information security and that should happen, there is no end of nonsense that will ensue, whether it's the hardship of having to recover from some terrible incident or everyone finding out that happened. So you have to be cognizant of that possibility and try to avoid it at all costs. And what we find here at GuidePoint, we have a pretty good crew all the way around. We are increasingly seeing folks submit stuff, even stuff that we send internally as potentially suspects. So to your point earlier about it being too good to be true, I would layer in there probably, are there misspellings? Is the grammar poor? Is the linked attachment or the linked file or the attachment to the actual message, is it weirdly named that makes no sense? So I think as we kind of work through our day to day, we have an obligation to ourselves to try to be the best correspondent we possibly can. To the extent sometimes I'll go into our Slack channels and I'll say, hey, just be aware we're sending a message. So please don't submit that as a phishing attempt, because no, it really is what it'll look like. But that's increasingly a way we have to approach that, because folks, thankfully, at GuidePoint, at least so far, have not been credulous. And I agree that you need to be skeptical.
Well, good. And in fact, I want to kind of pivot our direction here a little bit and talk about some of those community and shortages in the industry. And if I hear correctly, I believe I see something, Amber, in the bottom left of your camera view. It happens to be one of the key items. That's just a great example of how, people like yourself are passionate about the community around cybersecurity and what's going on with our labor shortage and the open positions. And even furthermore, one of the things that you mentioned to me was introducing cybersecurity at home early on. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so I think, it's pretty common nowadays to throw an iPad in front of a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old. And so, right, they grow up with this tool set. It's kind of like our industry now, right? For a long time, security kind of trailed everything else, right? So we would build and we would produce and create, but we wouldn't put controls or security around it. So there were all these gaps and, just places, vulnerable spots for our organizations. And the same thing is true right now. A lot of these products do have certain things built into them, and it's great. But I think ultimately teaching kids not just how to use an iPad or a phone or, whatever it may be, but saying, hey, here's also what we need to look out for, right? Like it could be just as simple as, hey, if somebody sends a text or somebody calls or something happens on the screen that's different than what you're doing, tell me or bring it back to me, right? And it's kind of setting that very early in their minds of, just always be cautious. I wouldn't say always be worried because I don't want that to be, the internet's bad. In fact, I talk about that in the book, but I think, just having that just awareness, right, to what they're doing. And, eventually as they get older, I'm not saying too old, probably maybe 5 or 6, maybe this book helps you have those talks. But I think, kind of elevating that conversation as to why we're doing this, right? Like why we need you to be secure, what kind of things there are, what to look out for. So yeah, I just think that's so important. My kid is 10. Right. And I was the parent that was like, here you go. Just while I'm driving, please don't scream in the car. Here's an iPad. Just do that. Right. And then I realized, I need to start putting that in his mind because I won't always be there. Right. So I want to make sure that he can stay safe with or without me there. So.
And what's interesting? So you talked about how the children are growing up in this generation with technology and they have these iPads. And actually something I found clever is that there's already kind of this instilled concept of cybersecurity. Younger kids and stuff like that already are aware that things need to have a passcode, or they are already kind of aware that when things get a little bit suspicious to come running, in fact. But they're also little hackers, I've noticed, right? Like people will get past whatever security tools you may have in place and circumvent things and continue to push the limits. I know, Steve, you are probably finding some of those challenges in our own employees and their childish behaviors trying to circumvent our security controls.
It as childish. We'll call it whimsical. It's a whimsical set of behaviors, and certainly they're both passionate and inspired. And if they can find a clever way to do something, if only to demonstrate their cleverness, they might do that. I'm not to say that there aren't those that toe the line explicitly, and certainly I'm grateful for them doing that. And then there's a couple folks out there that just have their curiosity extends to what is the art of the possible, whatever the consequences. So what we end up having is this sort of ebb and flow of our back and forth with the different people in the company. And as we enable different systems to provide more information, you find exactly how the ebb and the flow is proceeding. So in short, I'm very happy with everybody here. I find them to be a delight, and I hold them all in high esteem and regard. But yes, no, that is a challenge. And at home, my kids are 21 and 17. And so they didn't get smart devices till they were a little bit older. And so I would put controls on them, and they could not get them out. That was something they weren't that interested in doing. But as they got older, I had to take them off, and that's the scary part, because then there's the whole big bad world out there, and they like things like Instagram. And, when you talk about stuff like that for children, there's an opportunity there to fail that, grownups, I think, are cognizant of enough. Well, apparently some are, because I watch a lot of stuff on YouTube and I think, wow, that was an incredibly bad choice. But at least the children, they're not fully formed as a person yet, so they might make a terrible choice, and you hope they don't. But I think my wife and I were pretty aggressive about messaging that. So,
Yeah.
and my wife is stalking them on everything. So, I've always got another set of eyes out there that some parents may not do. I don't, because I just have too much to do. But she finds the time. But in the end,
I have a lot of notes to capture from both of you as I go on this adventure too.
Right.
And talking about children and learning this stuff early specifically, and trying to broach the idea of cybersecurity and awareness and training. This kind of leads right into the fact that we still have a bit of a grand amount of skilled individuals in our industry, especially when it comes to cybersecurity. And so Amber, you mentioned to me the book that you kind of put together. The messaging isn't just necessarily targeted to just children, but this is a broader scope, right? What was your purpose or meaning behind that?
Yeah, so I'm assuming that you're talking about the nonprofit. So essentially, I think, when I made this book, it was initially for my son. It was kind of a way for, me to get out that's kind of how I express myself when it gets tough to express myself with words, is I'll just kind of draw it out, right? I've done that with my customers. All of you know who you are. Thank you for being patient. And then also, kiddos, right? So I wanted to create a way to show kids kind of what we do, because my parents have been in IT for like 25, 30-ish years. And up until probably 5 years ago, I'd be like, what do you guys do again? You guys, something about like ticket system, like remedy tickets. Oh, so boring. And so I remember like just always being a kid and going, oh, my mom's on a call again, right? Conference call this, conference call that. I didn't really know what she did, right? And so I wanted my son to grow up kind of knowing, right? Because it kind of went in line with what I was already trying to teach him from, securing his own stuff. And that book was great. And then it helped me realize, if we're trying to get all kids interested in this, right, we can't just leave out, any particular part of society, right? And so I think, after doing some research and really looking into this subject, I know that I wanted to do more with my time here, right, on Earth. And then, of course, as a mom, just reaching out to kiddos who, would maybe are under unfortunate circumstances or in underserved communities, and they don't have access to things like this. I actually do have a video where I talk about that, and I break down, right, why cybersecurity is so important, especially in underserved communities, mostly because a lot of the time there are folks that will shy away from security because they just think that, maybe I don't have the best stuff. I don't want to get hacked. Kind of like you were saying, Steve, right? You were like, I just don't even want it at all, right? Because it's a threat vector. But instead, we can, educate and bring awareness and kind of, arm everybody with information. I think at the end of the day, information is, of course, more important than anything else. And so what we do with that information, how we get it out to folks, is definitely a responsibility of everybody here in this industry. Because it kind of starts with us as far as, sharing the knowledge that we have with others. So yeah, that's kind of what mine is aimed at doing.
I appreciate that. And that's also kind of where we're trying to do in general with GPS Live is to share our knowledge and our experience and target individuals that are not just in the industry today, but ones that are interested in the industry, ones that have family members or little ones, kiddos, that could grow up from being, the little cyber engineer to the professional cyber engineer.
Yeah.
And we hope that many more folks join now. In fact, Steve, I'm going to kind of put this on you because improv is fun, but I wanted to see if you to take an opportunity about our GPSU program real quickly, about how targeting the next generation of cyber engineers and helping them grow and be successful is something that we're interested in and trying to help promote.
Yeah, so I'll start by expounding on a point Amber made because it was well made. It can seem daunting. So you look at the expanse of cybersecurity and you realize, okay, it's usually fairly well glamorized in movies where people do incredible things that are not realistic and annoy the rest of us when we watch them. But it looks really cool. But it seems very complicated, and like there's this ocean of other stuff that you have to onboard before you can even hope to be part of what is not as glamorous as it looks like in the movie. So in the end, you want to make it so that it looks appealing, that it isn't fictionalized to the extent that it's not realistic, but it also seems inviting from a career standpoint. And I can tell you, when I started this back in 2005 and coming forward, I felt daunted too. It was very daunting. And so you jump ahead now for the 17 years I've been doing this, and you look at an opportunity like Guide Point University, and this is not a paid testimonial. I know the people that run that program here, but I'm just going to tell you what I think about it as a premise, and then what I've experienced as being a part of it. So I think that when, Amber and you were talking about how do we create that opportunity such that people would feel comfortable taking advantage of it and promote that broader expanse of our industry, so that we have the right people at the right place now and going forward. And it's the going forward part that I'm more worried about, because we do have a pretty significant shortage. Guide Point University is trying to solve that problem. And it does it for two reasons. One is selfless and one is selfish. The first reason, the selfless reason, is to pay it forward. Can we help people coming out of college or who are eschewing college and coming from different trade places, give them experiences they wouldn't have otherwise had? And then we are trying to promote this as a way to do good for your community, for your country, and still get paid for it. And then the selfish part of it is, we need to bring people on and entice them to come here. And maybe if you're more recently arrived and you're just starting out and you want to be able to be part of something, we can train you to do what we need you to do in a way that's appropriate based on our extensive industry experience. And so I recently had a fellow named Tom Wisman. He came up from a college in New Jersey. He was an intern with the corporate information security team this summer. He killed it. He gave me hope for the future, because I've seen some of my daughter's friends and my eyes start twitching and I just kind of get a little bit sad in my heart. But this fella came in and he killed it. And right now we have there's also fellowships for veterans that are moving from active service into the private sector. And we have a fellow on now, John Wilson. He's in the Air Force 20 years, and we're getting a chance to interact with him and get the benefit of his experiences. And that is an exceptional way to take people with these vast skills and capabilities and apply them in a meaningful way to solve a pretty significant problem. And so I think you're going to probably see more of this, because if you talk, you look at it from the model of where we have the minor leagues to the major leagues, right, in different sports. GPSU is a way to get your feet wet, learn how to do it right, get all of that real world industry experience, giving tutoring and counseling from people who've done it for a long time, and then prosper in this industry. So I'm a huge fan and I've seen it tried before in other places. This one has legs, and I'm particularly appreciative of Kevin Woods, stepping in and stepping up, and the federal practice within Guide Point sponsoring this, so that we can get these talents and these talented people in here to do this work and get a look at them. They get a look at us, and if everything works out, we both prosper. In the fullness of time, they certainly will. So I think that's a great idea, and I appreciate the opportunity to advocate for it. I'm not getting paid for this specifically, and I really do feel this way, even though it's my own company. So this is a genuine sentiment coming from me.
Yeah, and so to even roll things back a little bit in the age range, right? Amber, one of the things you were mentioning to me is about not just work with the nonprofit that you have going, and how this book helps lead to those kind of things, but specifically you mentioned around the introduction of cybersecurity and this kind of awareness and curriculum in underserved communities, in schools that normally wouldn't have access to these kinds of things, right? Mm-hmm. And get exposed to this as a career. Talk to me about that kind of goal there.
Yeah. So I think, I've actually lived through this, right? So I talked about this on my last little bit that I did live. But my son recently, started attending a STEM school. I had enrolled him. Oh my gosh. Cause they're usually charter schools. So there's an enrollment process, and it's kind of like a lottery of sorts. And so for 4.5 years, I have been anxiously waiting to get him in there. And, it's just, he's now that he's over there, he actually talked to me the other day. We were walking the dogs, and I was like, okay, what'd you learn in tech today? And he goes, I learned about VPNs. And I kind of stopped, and I was like, yeah, what? That's amazing. Like, oh my gosh. Yesterday, he's like, I learned binary. I know what it all means from a very, very foundational level. And I was like, this is the most amazing, I could cry. I'm so happy. Right. And I mean, it was not until I started in this career that I knew what most of that was. Right. So, And that just goes to show, unless you're exposed to it or even taught it early on through school, is usually where it comes from, right? If not parents. And so I just think it's very important to get curriculum. And I know they're doing a great job of it now. It's definitely becoming more of a common thing than it is
Yep.
taboo. But definitely getting more of that out there. So working with school districts, actually, so cyber.org is like a free, kind of a free service where you can go and get curriculum for schools to teach around this. And so I think not many people are aware of that. Again, I wasn't until I was told about it. So I'm one of those folks. But now that I do know, I'm like, shouting it from the rooftops. And so I just think that if we give this as an option young, right? When I was young, I wanted to be a doctor. That's the only way I knew to help people, right? I was like, you can't really help people doing other stuff. A doctor's who helps people. And so you don't really learn about that stuff from school unless it's brought to your attention, right? And so I think that this is a really important thing that we need to be doing as well. So I know STEM schools do it. They're great, but I think that should also trickle down to anybody who's in a public school or any other type of schooling system.
I love it. Like I'm also, right in tune exactly with what you're saying. The Great American Teach-In, for example, is one of those places where schools will bring in professionals from the industry. And I love taking the opportunity to go and share my knowledge and my experience. I can see Steve smiling big because I believe he hears what I hear, which is my little one in the background.
I remember those days well. So yes.
Kiddos. But as we're rounding off, the top of the hour here for our show, I did want to throw out a little bit of a lightning round. I gave you both about 2 minutes of preparedness on this one, but I wanted to share at least one thing that everybody can do for Cybersecurity Awareness Month in to prevent cyber incidents. And so as an example, I'll go ahead and go first and share my number one tip that I like to give to my friends and family in the community. And that's to pick up the phone and call somebody. If you get a text message or an email and it just is a request, it's a sense of urgency. We don't call each other enough. We don't even leave voicemails anymore. And so pick up the phone and call that person and validate and make sure that that request is legitimate and it is something of honor, or I don't know, better word than that, but something of value. And I talked about this a little bit on my LinkedIn. I put a post about a social engineering attempt that happened for me on Facebook, and what were the key details that helped me identify that it was malicious. And so, Amber, since you are next up on my block, what is a great tip that you have to share with the community?
I actually will share one that's, maybe it's common for some, but one of the things that the article talked about too that I loved is never post where you are. Well, it's kind of tough where you are going, especially if you're like, if it's a conference or something, when it's like a public place, it's probably a little safer, but still I usually post that I have been somewhere, not that I am going somewhere. Right. So I think you can kind of post after the fact, unless it's like your work, probably never, ever post that. But, if you attend something, dinner with friends, this is going out to everybody, right? So anybody, just really be cautious about what you're putting out there, and just know that whatever you put out there is public and it might be forever out there. So just keep that in mind and be diligent about it.
You're absolutely right that the internet, as much as we don't like to admit it, is forever. And those are the kinds of little bits of compromising information a bad actor is going to want to collect, identify, and potentially use against you. So thank you, Amber, for that great tip. And thanks for playing along with the lightning round of things. Now, Steve, can you round us off here with your wonderful tip for Cybersecurity Awareness Month?
Won't be as wonderful as the ones you shared already. But what I've done for myself is I had a scare when I was refinancing my house where a package full of all of my most sensitive information went sideways. We thought they found it, or at least they said they did, but it was terrifying. So one of the things I've done for myself is it's not necessarily free from cost, and that's why I was hesitant to share it, but I do not do password reuse at all. So I have a password manager that I pay for. And I use a different password for everything that I use. And the only one password I keep memorized in my brain forever is my banking password. That is not recorded anywhere. So, and I have multi-factor authentication on that. But by compartmentalizing those accounts with those passwords, makes it harder for folks to do terrible things to you. And frankly, what I also did at the same time is I took because I've been using my Gmail account. I was like an early adopter for that too. And I've had it for over 20 years now. And I was like, I probably ought to have one just for banking that no one has any access to or awareness of. And that's what I did. I broke it out. So I have a special account that I use just for the banking part that is only for that. And then I have the garbage bin that is my Gmail account and special passwords for everything. So that's what I would suggest.
That's great. Can I add one more thing along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this came up when we talked about TikTok and stuff. You don't have to use your real information when setting up accounts. So you don't need to use your actual email, your actual name, address, phone number, anything like that. I mean, unless you want to do 2FA or MFA to sign in. But for the most part, I mean, I would never give my actual information. And you can get a free Google Voice number. You can do that too. And you can use that for setting up accounts and it'll still go to you. So again, careful what you put out there.
Yeah, these are fantastic tips. And the best part is these are things that everybody, whether you think that you are a techie or not, can apply in your current lives. And so I wanted to personally thank both of you, Amber and Steve, for joining this week's episode of GPS Live. Again, this is the week of October 14th, 2022, for those viewing again in the future. And so as always, part of our outro, my name is Jonathan Singer.
My name is Amber DeVilbiss.
My name is Steve Rosenkrantz.
And thank you so much for tuning in. I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. Stay safe out there and enjoy. Take care.
Yes,
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.